Talk a little bit more about this Russia collusion issue. Durham has indicted this guy, Michael Sussman, who lied to the FBI, brought them fake information, was working with Perkins Coie. That law firm used to have a guy by the name of Mark Elias who went all through the states from 2016 to 2020 trying to change the rules and so forth. All kinds of dark money behind him. From
and got fired from Perkins Coie.
Well, he certainly left. And
because it's hot.
It's hot. Hillary Clinton was behind most of this.
Yeah.
What do you want to say to Hillary Clinton?
Well, I think it's disgraceful. I think that I always knew it was a hoax. And I tell the story. During the campaign, people would come up to me, different people, young people, old people, people that were working on my campaign. So what do you know about Russia? I said, nothing. What do you know about Russia? Nothing. 2 months later, what do you know about? Sir, do you know anything about Russia? After about 5 times, I'd say, what the hell is going on with Russia? They've created a false, just a totally fabricated story. They made it up in either her kitchen or a law office. She spent millions of dollars, Crooked Hillary did this, millions and millions of dollars, gave it to Steele, who's a nut job. And he did the whole FBI. And John McCain, not my favorite person, I knew him well. He sent a copy to the FBI. Great Republican he was, right? Let's take down the Republican president. He sent a copy of a fake report to the FBI. If you did a movie, nobody would believe it.
No.
Okay, nobody would believe it. And a lot of people say to me, how you survived is one of the most incredible things. Don't forget, I fired Comey. Had I not fired Comey, you might not be talking to me right now about a beautiful book of 4 years at the White House. And we'll see about the future. The future is going to be very interesting. But I fired Comey, that whole group, and now that group is coming back again? I mean, it's not believable. It shouldn't be allowed to happen. Shouldn't be allowed to happen.
You have some beautiful photographs in the book. The book is called Our Journey Together, and you can get it at 45books.com, 45books.com, with Rush Limbaugh.
Yeah.
Who was an early supporter of yours.
Right? I didn't know him. I never met him. He supported me right after the escalator.
I know both of you.
Yeah.
And there's a similarity, in a sense, with both of you. You really are individual human beings who do what you think is right. You're free spirits. You don't play the game with the social communities or the media or anything else. And I think Rush, who was one of my best friends, saw that in you. And that's what attracted him to you. He said, this guy's different. He speaks out, he fights, he's not hiding. He takes the media on because, you know, they used to come after him and so forth.
Yeah.
What do you make of that?
So Rush was interesting. Obviously, I knew he was, you know, like the biggest of all time on radio, talk radio, and all of that. And by the way, you're doing really well, too.
Thank
I
you,
must
sir.
say, you and the great Sean Hannity are doing great. But Rush was, even Sean would say, irreplaceable. He was an amazing guy. But I didn't know him. I never met him. And I came down and I made a speech. It was quickly written. I didn't have speechwriters or anything, 'cause perhaps the day before I didn't even know if I was running. And I came down, I talked about the wall, I talked about the horrible things, I talked about the rape and all of the things that were going on with this tremendous migration, which, by the way, is a tiny fraction of what it is now. I had it brought to the lowest number in our country's history. And now it's the highest number after just a few months. It's the highest number, the worst number in our country's history. But I talk about immigration, I talked about the wall, talked about a strong military, talked about all these different things, right? And I heard that somebody came into my office at that time in Trump Tower. It said, we understand, sir, that Rush Limbaugh is a big fan of yours. I said, well, that's really nice. I don't know him, but that's really nice. And then I'd hear more and more and more. And then eventually I got to speak to him on the phone quickly, and then we met and we fell in love, okay? We had a great relationship. I mean, he was great. His wife is a great person. And he was an amazing, he could talk for 3 hours without phone calls. You know, it's easy to do it with phone calls. What do you think of this? What do you think of that? he would just sit there and talk. He didn't actually like taking phone calls. You know that.
Right.
He took very few phone calls. When you made a call, it was very rare. It was very interesting, because I think it's much easier to do the call. Even if you have hostile calls, to me, that's like easy. You know,
Right.
you wrap up the 3 hours or the 2 hours. He would sit there for hours and just talk. And people were spellbound. I mean, it was incredible. I said, who does this? Who could do this? And he really became a tremendous fan. So he got sick. And I have the honor of giving out the Presidential Medal of Freedom. That's the highest award you can get outside of the Congressional Medal of Honor. This is civilian, that's for the military. And we've given them to great people, great people. And I said, you know what I'm going to do? Making the State of the Union. It was coming up. Rush was very sick, and yet he wasn't missing a day. He'd go to a hospital in Boston and come back, and he'd do his show, and he was going through, he had a tough one in terms of the various cancers. Mm-hmm. He had one that, I guess they would say no chance, but he felt there was a great chance, all right? That's the way he was, optimistic about everything, about this country. He loved the country as much as anybody I've ever known. But he got sick, very sick. And I said to Melania, First Lady, who's very popular, by the way, every time I do, we love our First Lady, we love our First Lady. I said to Melania, I said, you know, he's a great guy. He's had an incredible career. People love him because he loves our country. We're going to give him the award, and I think I'm going to do something that's never been done. I'm going to give it to him during my State of the Union. And it was wild, because I did it, and you know, you have just about 50-50, right?
Oh, yeah.
And the side on the right happened to be, in this case it's the right, but it was the Democrats sitting on the right. And they were like this, except for one or two people. I must tell you, Joe Manchin had a beautiful smile on his face. He even lightly applauded, and a couple of others too, because they understood the greatness of what Rush had done. But for the most part, it was just stark cold. And the left, which in this case was the Republicans, you never saw people go crazy like that. For 5 minutes, they were screaming, and Rush, you know, as you know, he's told you, he considered it the greatest honor of his life. But it was such an honor for me to have done it. And it wasn't even that controversial. You know, it's very interesting. I thought I was going to be killed on that one, like getting out of the Paris Accord where I wasn't, and doing other things where I wasn't, because the people of this country know. But I thought on that one I'd be hit hard, and I wasn't, because people understood. He was a great man. He loved the country, and I was really honored to have his support. And he wasn't with like anybody else. He knew a lot of the senators that were running. He knew everybody that was running. But he just saw my first opening remarks, speech. I guess you could call it a speech. It was just remarks about what's wrong with the country and what could be right. And he loved it. And from day one, he was a fan. So he was just a terrific guy, and we miss Rush.
And what you did was very classy, because I can tell you afterward, he called me about it, and we spoke about it. He couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
And it was the thrill of his life.